Hello, everybody, and welcome to an MLS update edition of the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and after match day 2, we've got Philly and San Jose top of their respective conferences, just as we all expected. We've got Houston, the LA Galaxy, Sporting KC, and Seattle with 1 combined point, just as we all expected. And we've got Inter Miami averaging 3 goals scored per game, which is actually what we all expected. But what didn't we expect? Here with me to provide some Week 2 overreactions based on what we have seen thus far are Jack White's new best friend, Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
I can only wish that were true, Taylor Rockwell. Yes, I was within about 20 feet of him last night, so I think that counts. Me and 3,000 other Glaswegians are now his best pals.
You were in the sphere of best friendness. Did he play all the hits? Did he play everything you wanted him to play last night, Graham?
He did indeed. I did wonder whether he would do that solo artist thing of not playing the big hit from the biggest song of the 21st century, but he finished on it. So I think that's kind of the law. If you write the biggest song of the last 25 years, you kind of have to close out your show with it. I had a good time.
All right. I'm glad you had a good time. We've got Jack White's new best friend joining us as well. Russell Hantz's new best friend. It's Joe Lowry. Joe, for me, that's a topical reference for people who aren't actively watching 10-Year-Old Survivor episodes. Do you think it landed?
I think it landed for a subsection of our audience, which is totally fine with me. The thing that I'm struggling with, Taylor, is I know for a fact that you hate Russell Hantz from Survivor.
Correct.
So I don't know exactly how to square our relationship and my fake relationship with Russell. I'm having a hard time with all of this.
See, I know that. Wait, do you like the villains? Do you like the villain turns and the kind of heel performances on the show?
I can't believe this discussion is continuing on air. I've just had to endure 30 minutes of Survivor chat between Joe and Taylor before we started recording. I was like, Russell Hantz. I was concerned for a moment. I was like, is this like someone who came on for the Whitecaps?
Graham. You're supposed to know who he is. No, I do like the villains, Taylor. I don't like all of the villains, but I enjoy a little chaos tossed into Survivor now and then. I can get on board with that.
How do you feel about his pork pie hat that he wears in every episode?
Fantastic.
Cool.
I think we should all start wearing them, frankly. In fact, he's trying to get me to wear them in this relationship that's very, very real.
Graham, one question for you about Joe. Do you feel like Joe has gone into MLS witness protection or something? We've lost the palm tree. Now we've got nondescript blank wall behind him. How are we feeling about this?
I've told you my theory on this, Taylor. It's like the Bundesliga English language social accounts. He is in the same building as all the MLS creators. Next door is Doyle. Weeby's in the room next to him. Yeah, it's like a dorm.
Weeby just eating ribs on a camera, but he's got a green screen behind him. Okay, I see what we're working with.
They don't send any ribs to my room, first of all. Second of all, referencing the background there, just to peel back the curtain all the way for listeners and viewers, this is my first time trying out this new camera that I'm using. On my local video, everything's frozen for me. So you guys can still see me? Oh, it's frozen. Cool. All right, this is going to be interesting. Really excited to see how this goes.
But at least it's frozen with you looking mildly sour about the thing that I'm asking you, which feels appropriate for both this introduction and today's episode, where we will be talking about Week 2 overreactions. I think in the past, in talking to Matt Doyle and talking to Joe, I think Doyle has said that after Week 4, he starts to feel like he has somewhat of a grasp, and by Week 10 is where he feels like we know for sure who's going to be good, who's not going to be good, who needs to do some spending. So we're going to go a different route and say Week 2, what have we learned, Graham and Joe? What are the takeaways, the hot takes we can have, the basically massive overreactions that we will then regret maybe 2 weeks from now, maybe 1 week from now? We'll find out. Graham, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I'll get us started. I've worn my pink Euphoria, as I learned this was called, Inter Miami home jersey today. To mark maybe the hottest take of all time that I will ever make on this show. I'll explain, I promise, right? So, right at the top of my notes, I've got the headline, Inter Miami are a better team without Leo Messi. Now, the key term there, I know, hot, I'm not even sure that I fully believe it. But anyway, the key word there is team, right? Inter Miami, they will win more matches with Messi because he's Messi. He'll score loads of goals. He'll do lots of Messi stuff. But as a more fully rounded outfit and a reflection of what Javier Mascherano wants, and look, Javier Mascherano, I know he was the Argentina U23 manager. He was the manager at the Olympics. I remember we watched a bunch of that tournament. So I had a little bit of an awareness of Javier Mascherano, but it's not like you're bringing in Tata Martino, who we've seen loads of. We know how his teams play. So I'm kind of learning on the job of what Javier Mascherano wants from this team. But from what I know about Javier Mascherano and I've read and heard, the way that Inter Miami played against Houston is closer to what Mascherano wants from this team than when Messi is in this team. And that doesn't mean that they're going to win more games. But as I say, as a rounded team, I can see why this Inter Miami team without Messi maybe functions a little bit. There's a little bit more coherence to how they play. And as I say, against Houston, who had to apologise for Messi not making to the trip to Texas. I was going to ask Taylor at the top of this episode. Ryan's not on this show today. Do we have to offer listeners a refund for Ryan not being on the show? Or actually, when Ryan's on the show, is that the thing we need to apologise for?
Boom roast.
I do frequently feel like when it's me hosting, I should apologise. So yes, I'll apologise and offer listeners a refund from Graham's bank account. Just email at Graham Ruthven at Scotland, and I'm sure it will work out just fine.
I feel like I'm going to have to apologise for this take at the end. But anyway, the point I'm getting to is Inter Miami against Houston, really proactive, pushing high up the pitch. I think 2 of their 4 goals, the first goal certainly, and the third goal, I think, come from high turnovers up the pitch. They push that midfield unit of, Kramaski's on the right. They've got Segovia, who's been so impressive so far. One of my theories on Inter Miami was the players that they'd lost in the off-season they'd struggle to replace. Well, Segovia replacing Diogo Gomez, they're looking pretty good with that replacement right now because there's a little bit more matchcraft to him. He's obviously scoring goals, which is not something we fully associated with Diogo Gomez. So the way that they played against Houston just made me feel so much better about this Inter Miami team in terms of coping without Messi.
Yeah.
They've got Champions Cup games this week, or a Champions Cup game this week. That's why Messi is left at home. They're going to continue rotation throughout the year because they've got the Club World Cup in the summer as well. So we're going to see this again. And last season, the depth with Leo Campagna and a number of other pieces were the thing that allowed them to keep going through the summer. I kind of feel like they found the same again. So Inter Miami, they're looking pretty good. Maybe even as a fully coherent unit, better without Messi, as weird as that sounds.
Yeah, the overreaction here, and this is all a bit of a bit, right? Like the overreaction is that Miami are better without Messi. I think the reality is Miami have a lot of quality in this team, and to what you said there at the end, Graham, have done a good job of retooling this squad. It's not that Graham Ruthven is team Ben Kramaski over Lionel Messi, who it also sounds like maybe wasn't just left at home for rotation, also is probably dealing with a little bit of an injury as well. We'll see how long that ends up keeping him out. Maybe we'll see him later this week. I don't know. But this Miami team, you mentioned Segovia, Graham. He looks really good in this midfield group. He was playing as the most advanced of that midfield trio with Busquets and Yannick Bright in the game against Houston. And he's not a perfect player. Like, he still struggles at times to receive on the half turn. There's some things in his game to clean up, but he's dynamic, he's energetic, not in the same Diego Gomez, I'm going to run through you and maybe I could play free safety in the NFL kind of way, but in a more finesse sort of way, which I think actually serves this Miami team, because no matter where they go, they're not going to quite dominate the ball like the Crew do, but they're going to keep a ton of the ball, and they want to work through tight spots, and really, more than any other team in MLS, more than any other ball-dominant team in MLS, it's on the players to kind of find those solutions. When Javier Mascherano comes in, that move was never going to represent a major tactical shift for Miami. When you have Luis Suarez and you have Lionel Messi in most games, you simply cannot create like a really coherent defensive tactical structure, which means you can't do a whole lot with detailed possession structures as well. This is a player-driven team when it comes down to the tactics. And to have someone like Segovia, who is a young Venezuelan player, I believe he's 21 years old, came over from the Portuguese top flight where he was playing, decent minutes for a top half of the table team in Portugal, and is already a full Venezuelan international. Like, this is an impressive profile, always was coming into the year. He looks good. Again, there are still things to work out in his game, but Miami and their ability to adapt and to pick up points here and there when they're not shooting themselves in the foot. Maybe that's the crucial bit of this game against Houston. Over the weekend, Houston shot themselves in the foot. Miami didn't. Against NYCFC, they shot themselves in the foot multiple times with Toto Aviles, with Jordi Alba making mistakes. The Alba one is less repeatable than the Aviles one. Aviles doesn't start in this game, not least because he was suspended for getting a red card on opening weekend. That Noah Allen and Lujan center back pairing is just so much less disastrous, honestly. So if Miami can figure out a way to stabilize, they're going to be in a really good spot.
Yeah, and I think if they can, I know my hot take is that Miami are better without Messi. That makes them a more proactive pressing unit. If they can take some of what we saw against Houston and add it to when Messi is back in this team, we saw in the second half of last season, teams started to figure out there was space in behind. And we saw it in the first game in that moment in Thomas Aviles when he makes that challenge. NYCFC have managed to get in behind. if the evolution in this team is to to be harder for opponents to play through them by pushing higher up and having those pressing triggers. For the first goal, where it's out by Kromaski and it's Jack McGinn who gives up the ball, there's like 4 or 5 Inter Miami players in this pinched over to the right side. If that's a repeatable thing for Inter Miami once Messi is back in the team, back in the lineup, that is something that really could push this team to even higher levels, as difficult as that is to imagine.
So, Graham, I appreciate your take. Joe, I appreciate your analysis of that take. I also appreciate both of you attempting to explain why Messi wasn't at that game, whereas I just assume it's akin to the scene from Always Sunny in Philadelphia in which Mac is trying to decide where he's going to sail once he becomes rich and famous, and it's just a map of the world that he's slowly marking through with a permanent marker. Like, Australia's ruled out because it's too angry or too violent. Africa's too hot. South America's too angry. He doesn't know what happens on the West Coast, and it ends up with him just sailing around the northeastern coast of the United States. I feel like Messi similarly was like, I don't know what happens in Houston. I'll cross that out. I don't know what's going on in Kansas City. I'll cross that out. Like that's kind of what I'm assuming is the way it works out. But I'm willing to give you both credit, and Graham, I appreciate that you started us off with a phenomenal overreaction about Messi not being that good. I'm pretty sure that was what you said.
That was
distilling
the point,
it all
yes.
down. Cool. Joe, let's go to you. Give us an overreaction if you would.
Yeah, Graham Ronaldo Ruthven is what everybody's always said about him. My overreaction is that the LA Galaxy are in big trouble. And I honestly don't know how big of an overreaction this is. This is less of an overreaction than Graham's. I think we could all agree on that so far. And Graham's got more that he's going to cook up and toss out. So I'm excited about this as well. But the thing with the Galaxy, they have failed to win both of their games so far. They are about to start CCC play because they enter along with the Crew around later because they were very successful last season. The Galaxy have really struggled so far this season. They struggled against San Diego, and we talked about that game in detail on last week's episode of this show in that 2-0 loss. And then they come out on Sunday of this week, and they lose 2-1 to the Vancouver Whitecaps, and we're the second best team on the field for the entire game. Yep. There are some extenuating circumstances, and this is why I'm not good at doing this sort of episode and why I'm not good at doing hot takes. There are extenuating circumstances. Mickey Amane out injured. They had to put Emiro Garces at right back in this game. He then comes off injured at halftime. Then you look higher up the field, and you're still missing all the pieces that we already know. You're still missing Ricky Puig. We can't even think about that anymore. Like the Galaxy in 25 have to be a team that has success without Ricky Puig. So that's the last time I'm going to say it. Joseph Painsil on the left wing is still out injured, and you're still trying to bet in your new players. Christian Ramirez doesn't start this game. Instead, it's Miguel Berry. Diego Fagundes is out on the left side filling in for Painsil. They just looked bad. Marco Reus is out of this team. And the midfield is the thing that really I was keyed in on in this match. Instead of Marco Reus at the 10, he was on the bench. It was Lucas Sanabria, who started in the double pivot against San Diego. Sanabria moved up into that 10 spot. And at the base of midfield, it was Edwin Cerrillo and Elijah Winder. There was a lot of combativeness in that midfield. I don't think it did a lot of good for the Galaxy in this game on Sunday, but there wasn't a lot of quality in possession in that group. Edwin Cerrillo is a capable number 6 in this league, maybe even a good one. He is not a great in-possession player. You look at Elijah Winder, he's played 2 MLS games ever. This was his first ever MLS start coming out of the USL Championship with Louisville City. If you want to get a player out of the championship, Louisville City is probably your best bet, and I do really like his game, as we talked about in our previews. He's raw. And even Greg Vanny has told me, he's a guy who likes to stretch. He likes to go box to box. He's dynamic. He's a different profile. And then Sanabria, he's just not a 10, straight up. I think he's more of a 6 than he is a number 10. The Galaxy could not break Vancouver's press. They could not access the final third with any regularity. And this was the same story against San Diego, even when Marco Reus was in the team. There's a lot of problems with this group, like a lot of problems. And their schedule's about to get thicker. And I don't know that bodes especially well for this team.
Yep, Joe, same page, and I was trying to figure out how to make this into an overreaction. It sounds like we struggled similarly, because I was going to say, Galaxy are in trouble, but that feels pretty obvious to your point. I think the really
Galaxy
worrying
are
thing...
getting relegated. Too far?
Yes. Hot take. Sizzling.
Here's what I've gone with. I'm glad that you're not going to talk about Puig anymore, because I'm going to talk about him right now. Ricky Puig will not play this season, which itself isn't that big of an overreaction, because it was always like, will he come back for the very end of the season? Will he be back for the playoffs? But I think that they are going to struggle, the Galaxy. I think Joe's laid it out well. I would add to that I think last season, with the full attacking options they have, with their full array of attacking options, you can maybe have that make up for a lack of defensive quality, because if you are possessing if you are a threat whenever you have the ball, then you are killing the game off with possession, with passing, with creativity, and you're maybe scoring 4 goals. And so even if you concede 2, you're still winning. Now when you don't have that level of control and when you don't have that consistent threat of attacking creativity and power, it exposes some vulnerabilities, and I think that was on display against Vancouver. So I think this Galaxy team is going to really struggle to find consistency. I'm not saying they're going to drop out or get relegated. That would be a bigger deal. But I think they're going to be like right around the playoff line. Maybe they make the playoffs, but that's not the biggest of accomplishments. But I think all of that means they don't need to rush Puig back, and maybe there's a feeling of it's not really worth bringing him back for a middling team. Let's give him a full year of rest. Let's get him back for a preseason, and we'll get him back to like his rip-roaring form and ready to go for 2026.
Yeah.
So that's my overreaction.
Yeah, it would be fascinating to see. I think the only way, if Puig is healthy, the only way he doesn't come back is if the Galaxy are going to miss the playoffs, right? Like if they're already locked out. Because if you're the LA Galaxy and you bring back one of the 5 best players in Major League Soccer just in time for the postseason, where you are 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 games away from winning a trophy, you got to bring him back for that. So I don't know what's going to happen with Ricky Puig. That is still a long way away. The current reality for this team is they're struggling with the pieces they do have. Now, maybe this is my toxic trait, because I made this whole hot take. I kind of still think the Galaxy are going to be fine. I still think they are probably going to end up in the top 4 of the Western Conference, because I trust the talent. Joseph Paintel's going to come back in, 3-4 weeks, maybe less. I don't really know exactly what that timeline is. We're not looking at a long-term thing for him. He's going to come back, and all of a sudden, the fact that the Galaxy can't play through midfield, still a problem, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's less of a problem when you have one of the fastest players in Major League Soccer streaking down the left wing, and you can play the ball over the top. And then Gabriel Peck has more room to operate on the other side. You hope that Marco Reus discovers something, because he has been a non-factor in his minutes so far this season. I just trust the talent in this group. I still trust Greg Manny. And the fact that there are very little stakes, the stakes are low in this league, especially in the early season, I think the Galaxy have enough time and they have the talent to figure this out.
Not to labour the point, Joe, but it's that midfield that gives me concern as
Sure.
a counter to that point. So, like, Paintsel will be back. I think Garces comes off at half-time
Yep.
in this game as well, which is not ideal, just adds to their troubles. That midfield seems, with the exception of Ricky Puig, like that is the midfield, right? Like in terms of the pieces, and if they are unable to, I mean, the brilliance of this Galaxy team last season was their ability to convert that possession that they had into quick transition attacks, where they have Peck and Paintsel and Joveljic, and they're without 2 of those attacking pieces. But without that valve to get forward, I don't know how they utilise those players, because it's not like Gabriel Peck. I know he scores in this game and certainly looks more dangerous than he did against San Diego, where he basically posed no threat at all. Wasn't like he was ripping the caps apart down his side. So
Yeah.
that lack of service, I think, is like a fundamental core issue for this team.
And Marco Reus continuing to not play 90 minutes or look like he can play 90 minutes. I really don't know what to make of that, because I assumed he would be able to step in at least somewhat regularly to play 75, 80 minutes and maybe fill some of that Ricky Puig void, and we are not seeing that yet.
He's been a weird signing so far. I honestly sometimes forget that if you were to ask me like big name players in MLS, I wonder how many I would get to off the top of my head before I got to Marco Reus. I had a friend at this game, I mentioned it on Weekend Review, and he messaged me halfway through being like, wait, Marco Reus plays for the LA Galaxy? And I was like, that's a sentiment that is held by many fans of MLS. Yeah, we've just not seen him click for this team. Yeah, even when they won the cup last year. I know he plays in the MLS Cup final, but it does feel like if there's someone in this team that is going to rescue that midfield, maybe it's Marco Reus, but we haven't seen it so far.
Graham, give us one more overreaction, and then we'll go to break.
Okay, so my headline for this take is Philadelphia were absolutely right to get rid of Jim Curtin. So just to do a little bit of a recap, it was a gamble by Philly to make the managerial change over the off-season. We covered this in our previews, of course. The Union had a bad season last year. They missed out in the playoffs, but Jim Curtin was such a symbol of this club and had been so successful in the past, but Ernst Tanner wanted to build a team in his own image. And okay, it's only 2 games into this season, but Philly looks so much closer to being that team, to being that vision now. And watching their game at the weekend there, where they just absolutely demolished FC Cincinnati. The out-of-possession stuff that Bradley Cornell has managed to instill in this team is really, really impressive. Joe, I know you pointed this out in your backheeled column. Philly are vultures. Whenever in certain moments there are when it's like the Jason Momoa meme behind Henry Cavill. Like whenever the opposition turn their back or there's a back pass, Philly are on an opposition team immediately. They're so effective at that. And then that attack of Gazdag, Quinn Sullivan, that is, for all the talk of Cavan Sullivan, Quinn seems to have taken a big step forward this season. Ty Baribo has, I think, has the joint record for the most goals through the first 2 games of a season. He's tied, I think, Chicharito. Brian Cheng was on that list as well, which was a throwback when I saw his name. But he's getting proper service, Baribo, and I love his desire to get into the 6 at every opportunity. And even for one of his goals here, it was a little bit messy where he plays a ball across. He's still there. That is what's so difficult for teams to do, is to create opportunities that close to goal. And Philly, and through their first couple games, seem to be doing that on a regular basis, and Baribo is sticking them away. What I will say, to bring us back to down to earth a little bit, is their conversion rate, Philly, has been absolutely nuts over the first couple of games of the season, which feels very Bradley Cornell, St. Louis City expansion season, but it's been fun to watch them in the first 2 games.
It has been fun to watch this team play. I think the stuff they're doing, it certainly reminds me of St. Louis, and I wrote a bit about that as well over the weekend. I do think what they're doing is a bit more sustainable in that they're creating legit chances, and defensively they have looked, at least against Cincinnati, I thought they looked quite good in a way that St. Louis, what they did even from their very first ever game, it just didn't feel real, despite, maybe we all wanted it to be. It just didn't seem all that real. I seem to recall that I made basically the argument that Graham made when Jim Curtin was fired in the first place, and I was roasted for it on this show relentlessly on a listener question. Maybe by someone wearing a pink hat even on today's episode. We can't remember for sure, though. That episode's lost to history. I do think all along, and this is still too early, right? All this is too early. That's what makes it fun. All along, there was this idea that, okay, when the Philadelphia Union start being good, what had changed? What was different? What was new? It wasn't Jim Curtin, and I like Jim Curtin. I think he's a sharp coach. I think he dealt with a lot in Philly when it comes to lack of investment in the first team, different regimes changing around him. I would hire Jim Curtin as a coach for my MLS team. All of that said, the thing that coincided with the Union being good was not Jim Curtin. It was Ernst Tanner arriving in that front office, and I don't think that Ernst Tanner handled that situation with Jim Curtin, who is a Philly legend and deserved more respect than he got on the way out. No doubt about that. No one will argue with that, maybe except Ernst Tanner. I think the way that Ernst Tanner handled that was poor, but you look at Ernst Tanner's track record with finding really high-quality budget players in the team. You look at the midfield with Denley Jean-Jacques, and you look at Lukic coming into this team. They look good enough to do that job in a pressing system. You look at the kids that are still coming through this organization and are getting real minutes. It's impressive what they're doing so far. I think Philly looked really, really good over the weekend against Cincy. That's not a hot take at all. I think they could be a legit team in the Eastern Conference this year. I think they have benefited from the teams on their schedule having weird things happen to them. So Orlando in week 1, they win that game 4-2. Robin Janssen, who's the best defender on the field in that game, goes down, I think, in warm-ups, and Oscar Pereira has to make a change, and then the Union score 4 goals. And then in this game, Cincy are still dealing with CONCACAF Champions Cup play, and the Union aren't, right? So there are still weird early season rhythm disruptions happening here, which makes it too early to say, wow, this team is incredible. They're going to win something this year. We're not there yet. But do they look like a legit team? Yeah, to my eye, they do.
Yeah. Joe, do you have any thoughts on Bruno Damiani, who comes off the bench in this game? I brought him into my fantasy team because I was just desperate for a forward, and he had a big transfer fee attached to him. But I know very little about him other than the cameo we got off the bench in this match. How much should we be expecting from him this season? Like, how does he fit into this squad?
It's weird because the Union go out and they make him a young designated player. So he's coming over from Uruguay. What is he, 22? Almost 23? Yeah, 22. There we go. And I thought that was a strange signing because I didn't view striker as a real position of need, frankly, for this Union team. What it does say, though, is that Bradley Cornell absolutely wants to play with 2 forwards at any given time. And he wants to have 3 guys between Damiani and Ura and Baribo that he feels comfortable starting in any given game. You go out and spend $3 million on a player if you're the Philadelphia Union. You don't plan on having that dude sit on your bench every game, right? That's not how the Union allocate resources. So I think that was a bit of an odd signing, but it is a statement that Philly, 1, believe in his talent, and he was fairly productive in Uruguay, and 2, that the Union are going to be rocking 2 forwards in every game. So it's too early for me to have an in-depth read on Damiani on the field, but I do think we're going to see a lot of him for the Union in 2025.
So Graham with a very bold overreaction, Joe jumping on the bandwagon after the fact. That's definitely how that played out.
Classic
We're going to take
Joe.
a break, and we're going to come back to do some more overreacting. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show, in which just before break I fully sandbagged Joe, which means I'm going to go to Joe now to allow him to either take a shot at me or just do another week 2 overreaction. The floor is yours.
No, I feel bad. I took too many shots at you in the first segment, Taylor. I will do the overreaction instead. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to hold my hands up. I completely forgot that I put this in the doc. I thought I had the Galaxy one in the doc, so I do have another one. It is the Columbus Crew, who, guys, maybe they didn't need Cucho ever to win. You know, maybe they just didn't need the best attacker that's not named Leo Messi in Major League Soccer, because this Columbus team, they've won both of their games this year. They beat the Chicago Fire on opening weekend. They beat the New England Revolution. Taylor's wisely trying to distance himself from this take. That's the right play on your part, Taylor. Respect.
Taylor is picking up the pen he dropped while contemplating what flavor is the Kool-Aid that Wilfred Nancy serves you, Joe. I'm just curious.
It's delicious, and it doesn't matter what flavor or color it is. It just tastes good. That's all I know.
All right, cool.
The Crew look good. The game over the weekend was an ugly one against the New England Revolution. It was a 1-0 win. Jason Russell-Rowe gets another goal, and he has been scoring at a Cucho-esque rate to start 2025.
It's crazy.
It is an ugly game. The Revs, to their credit, I thought did a phenomenal job defensively in this match, defending in a really, really narrow 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1 at times, because all the Crew wanted to do was overload the midfield. Wilfred Nancy set his team up not in that classic flat 3-4-3, but in a 3-diamond 3, with Darlington Nagbe at the base of midfield. Then it was Zawadzki and I believe Chambos who were playing as those kind of number 8s. And then Diego Rossi was the number 10 underneath Jason Russell-Rowe. It's not a new look from Nancy. We've seen it a bunch of times in the past. It's not his regular look, but it's not new. The Revs responded really well, and they compressed those central spaces. They made Columbus play through the wingbacks, which they didn't want to do, and it ended up in basically a stalemate. It was an ugly game by the Crew's standards, and they still won. And they were still the better team, and they did all of this on the road in a difficult environment at Foxborough, not because the crowd is wild, but because it just is cold and it sucks. That is a sign of a good team. Like, that is a sign of a really, really good team. I wrote this last year. I said this last year when the Crew lost in the first round of the playoffs to the New York Red Bulls. Surprising upset. Credit to the Red Bulls. The Crew go home, and the question is, what's going to change for Columbus? Are they going to be able to keep Wilfred Nancy and Cucho Hernandez in this team, or are they going to lose one or both of them? I wrote at that time, I think keeping Nancy might matter more than keeping Cucho, which I realize is counter to everything that I say on this show about managers mattering less than players. Wilfred Nancy has been that sort of transformative. The Crew don't really look like they've missed a beat. Granted, they haven't played really very good teams yet. That's why this is an overreaction and not a proper reaction. But man, if they're able to sign Flaco Lopez from Palmeiras, Graham, or if they're able to add this DP into this team, they're gonna be scary good until Wilfred Nancy leaves. I think the rumors of the Columbus Crew's demise were greatly exaggerated.
Yeah, there are moments in this game. I didn't watch this full match, only caught the highlights, but from the attacking moments, the way that they're set up, and look, I've learned to expect this from a Wilfred Nancy team, but there are moments when Farsi is like inside the box in the central area, and then Max Arfson, I think, he pings one off the post after throwing in a step over, and I'm like, these are, I know in this game they're sort of positioned as wing backs, so maybe have a bit more of an attacking onus, but it's just crazy how Nancy gets so much more out of players, as proven by Russell-Rowe, who we spoke about at the start of the season, and sort of, we asked the question, but I don't think anyone expected him to be this productive this early. We asked the question, can he fill the void left by Cucho Hernandez? I assumed the answer would be no, and maybe it still will be no, but man, he's just immediately hit the ground running, and it's ridiculous how Nancy gets so much in a way that you wouldn't ordinarily expect out of players that you think you know.
Kool-Aid's in here, by the way. Just full jug of Kool-Aid.
Hey, I'm sipping on it too, man. Because watching the Crew both weeks, it is a like I watched them last year, Joe, not to the level that you did. I think I was like focused on DC and probably Miami and a few other teams, and I should have been more focused on Columbus. I'll hold my hands up, because watching them this season, it is just a genuine joy. It's a genuine delight to see a team that is all pulling in the same direction, that all works for each other, that knows when to press, knows when to step, knows when to win the ball, knows when to attack, knows when to hold off and kind of recycle possession. And so with that in mind, could you extend your overreaction to Jason Russell-Rowe is the new Cucho Hernandez? Because he definitely looks like he is not missing a beat thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think he's going to be the new Cucho in this team, nope. But I do think that he is absolutely in line for a bigger role in 2025. And I like Jason Russell-Rowe. He is one of the the best fits for a Nancy team, which is to say he's like a weird positionless sort of player. He's not, I don't think, strong enough back to goal to be a classic 9. He's not quick enough to be a direct 1v1 winger. He's kind of like this odd tweener attacking type who is smooth on the ball, likes to combine, and moves well off the ball. That's a Wilfried Nancy attacker in so many different ways. He works in this team. I like to see him score goals against some teams that maybe aren't going to be not towards the top of the Eastern Conference table. They have Houston, I think, coming up this week. That'll be an interesting test with how the Dynamo play. But yeah, Russell Rowe looks really good.
How much roster flexibility do the Crew have, Joe? I ask because this feels like a situation in which I assumed they would have had to replace Cucho, and so you're going to have to spend a bunch of money. You're going to have to kind of allocate resources, allocate roster spots. And with the flexibility they have at present, like you might want to replace him. Maybe they will end up doing that. But it also feels like because there is so much consistency in this team and in the coaching, you can sort of strengthen elsewhere as needed throughout the season and not kind of have to go immediately to the well of striker that has to come in and score goals right away.
Yeah, they have one DP spot totally open. They could still move Darlington Nagbe off of the DP spot as well. I don't know if they've got the cap space to do that. It certainly doesn't seem like they've got the desire to do that because they could have done it last year as well. Rossi is the only true DP on this team, and they don't have any U22 initiative players. So they've got lots and lots of roster flexibility at the moment. They will sign, I would have to imagine, they're going to land a DP, maybe something else in this window.
All right. Well, congratulations to the Crew. Commiserations to the Fire, or specifically to me, when it comes to my Fire prediction, because I'm going to say my overreaction is that I'm not going to get my Chris Brady prediction, my very specific prediction heading into the season. I said Sergio Orahel Jr. will play over 800 minutes. That feels like it's going to be good since he started both games so far. But I said Chris Brady's clean sheet percentage is going up, and thus far that has very much not been the case for Chicago. That defense is slightly porous, is how I'm going to put it. They were missing players this weekend against DC United, where they end up drawing 2-2. What I will say, my overreaction, is that Chris Brady is going to be an all-star and get a USMNT look in January, if not sooner, because his numbers in terms of shot stopping are pretty solid. Like expected goals allowed minus actual goals allowed is a pretty good metric, and thus far he's in the positive column. His week 1 performance less so than week 2, but he makes some big saves in this game, and I think he's a really reliable performer for the Fire thus far. So I do think even if their defense is porous, and even as they figure things out and how to maybe go from conceding multiple goals a game, I think Chris Brady is going to be a very reliable presence for them. So I think he ends up being an all-star based on 2 weeks of survey size.
He probably won't have to pick an overhead kick from, like, how far out was that? Like 15, 16 yards out from a corner kick every single week. If he does, then that's a problem for his USMNT hopes. He was chatting again about his national team prospects after this game. Still leaving that door open to a trip across the Atlantic. So we'll see. It might be like fastest finger first. Who can get to the phone quicker, Steve Clark or Mauricio Pochettino?
Steve Clark knows how to work a phone? That's exciting.
I'm not entirely sure he does. If he does, he's not got an excuse for Ryan Gauld for the last 3 years.
We've got our Scotland chat in, as I knew we would. Graham, any other week 2 overreactions from you?
Not so much an overreaction, just a miscellaneous thought. So I caught quite a bit of San Diego's game, which was not a match that I hugely enjoyed for both the off-field stuff and the way that they played. I mean, all the stuff that we said after the season opener against the Galaxy still apply. The San Diego team looked very secure in possession. They really restricted St. Louis in an attacking sense. So they have that platform. We spoke about this on Week in Review. Chucky Lozano going off probably won't help. I haven't seen, Joe, how serious that injury is.
That makes 3 of us on this show for sure. I don't think anything's out yet, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, so obviously San Diego will be praying that's not a serious injury because they are already restricted as an attacking force. You lose Lozano, that's a huge blow. But watching San Diego over the first 2 games, I'm kind of wondering if they know Kevin De Bruyne is coming this summer, because it feels like a team that is sort of built for him to drop in. They need someone in that midfield to take more risk with their forward passes. And instinctively, I'm thinking, well, they need an attacker. But actually watching them, I think what they need is someone to play forward from midfield. They have the base of the midfield. They've got maybe De La Torre can offer a little bit more in that regard. But you bring Kevin De Bruyne into that midfield, and I think maybe you get a little bit more penalty box presence from Ingvartsen, who has been dropping deep in the first 2 games. Maybe the need isn't there for him to do that. So complete speculation. But San Diego's interest in De Bruyne has been widely reported for a while now. He's out of contract at the end of the season. There's been no hint of him getting an extension at Man City. And I wonder if they know that he's coming in. And that's going to be the evolution we're going to see from this team in their expansion year.
I would be very excited for Kevin De Bruyne to join San Diego. That's a bit of an understatement. I would be concerned because we know the man can turn pink pretty quickly. We know he's been living in Manchester where they don't allow the sun. Moving to San Diego, I have some concerns. If we see him stockpiling sunscreen, I think we know that move is in the offing, and we should all be prepared accordingly.
Kevin De Bruyne stocks up on SPF 80 sunscreen in Manchester. More at 6.
SPF 6,000,
right.
I think, is what he needs, if I understand the sunscreen system correctly, which I don't, and I never will, and will never fully understand it. All I know is that I probably need to reapply, according to my wife. Any other overreactions from either of you? Any other miscellaneous thoughts from week 2?
Oh, other miscellaneous thoughts. I did think the Lucho Acosta finish. We mentioned the Jacob Morel finish against the Chicago Fire. The Lucho Acosta, here's a chair, Zach Steffen, please take a seat. Finish. Go look it up, listener and viewer, because we can't do it justice. It is just filth. It's absolute filth.
And it's not just the finish, Joe. It's the pass through from Peter Musa. Yep. Like, it's just completely effortless. Listeners need to see this to understand what I'm talking about here. But basically, Acosta feeds the ball into Musa. Musa's like, okay, I'm just going to play this through on an inch perfect ball through for you to sit Zach Steffen down and chip it into the back of the net. It's a great goal. And FC Dallas, I kind of wonder. I remember we previewed FC Dallas, and everyone, including myself, seemed pretty down on this team, which was understandable. But if they get anything close to the FC Cincinnati Acosta, and he's forming an understanding and a partnership with Peter Musa, that is something that, for all their flaws as a team, they're probably going to be better than we expected them to be. So that was one of my takeaways. Obviously, they still draw this game 3-3, so you still see the flaws in this team. But in terms of maybe making the playoffs, they could be in that bubble.
So we got some Survivor chat in earlier. Graham mentioned Scotland. We got Joe's Wilfred Nance love. Manchester United are frustrating, so I've got that box ticked. Graham, do you want to tick the Charlotte box for us since Ryan isn't here to do it himself?
Oh, if I must, yes. Let's not show Ryan this episode. Let's not tell him that we're giving Charlotte FC any.
He won't listen, so don't worry about it.
He does, but the thing is, you think he don't, and then he does. Yeah.
He always does. Yeah.
He'll listen to this if he knows we're talking about Charlotte, and also giving them praise, which I'm just about to do. So my hot take with Charlotte is they are a genuine threat for silverware in 2025. We spoke about this a bit on yesterday's weekend review, but 2 games in, I think they're going to be a problem in the East. You've got that defense that's still in place. You've got Ashley Westwood, as long as his legs don't explode at any point now that he's 35 years old. You've got him kind of keeping the rhythm in the centre midfield, and now they've added Zaha and Leo Labada. Like, I've been a big fan of Leo Labada. I've watched a bunch of him here in Scotland. I think he's a quality player, and I thought that was a quality signing when Charlotte made him. I think he's been pretty mid so far for Charlotte, but you add Zaha to that attack, you take a little bit of attention away from Leo Labada, and I think we even saw it in this game at the weekend against Atlanta for the Zaha goal, where he is released down the right side of Bada, he wins his duel, he has a shot, and then it's Zaha that finishes it. So yeah, feeling pretty good about Charlotte right now. I'm not ready to say that they're going to win the East or anything, having just said Inter Miami might be even better than last season, but they're looking good.
I'll toss out one sort of counterbalance to that. I also think Charlotte are going to be good. Sort of the Galaxy might be in trouble. Hot take. I don't know how sizzling we are with the Charlotte FC add Wilfried Zaha, and they were already pretty good last year. They might be good again this year. What I will say is that left side with Tim Ream and Wilf Zaha is weird. It's really weird. And Graham, I don't know what you thought of it in this game, Taylor, or how much of this game you saw. Tim Ream is playing at left back for Dean Smith, and he's too good not to play in this team. The problem is Andrew Privet and Adilson Malanda are also quite good and are probably worth getting on the field for this team at center back. So Tim Ream ends up at left back and Wilf Zaha ends up at left wing. And neither one of those players wants to get high and wide. Zaha wants to be in that left half space, kind of wants to be on the ball. He doesn't really want to stretch so much wide on the left. And Tim Ream did get on his horse and overlap a couple of times in this match, but out of necessity, not because he wants to do that, or maybe he does and likes to be free, but not because he's very good at it, right? It's a weird dynamic on that left side, one that I don't know.
If Tim Ream is riding a horse, is that horse's name about to be Glue?
Oh, well played. Wow, that's just excellent work. It's a weird dynamic on that side. I don't know how Charlotte are going to figure it out. I'm pretty sure that they had their best group of players on the field, which is a great start. Like if you get your best 11 players on the field in MLS, that means you're better off than probably a third of the league at any given time with injuries and CCC stuff. Charlotte were absolutely good enough in this game to get a win. I'm just curious. I'm curious to watch it. I think they're going to be really good this year. I've thought that all along. I love the take from Graham because I think it's spot on. Just curious to see how it all comes together in the long term.
Yeah, one thing I spotted from the first half, Joe, when you're talking about that dynamic between Zaha and Tim Ream, was actually an out-of-possession thing where there was a pretty clear channel between Gregerson into Almiron, who obviously was drifting wide and then cutting inside. And there were some moments where it felt like Charlotte were holding on for dear life and Old Man Ream was hanging on for dear life in those moments. But you're playing arguably the second strongest, at least on paper, second strongest attack in MLS. Like you're gonna have those moments, and Charlotte lived to tell the tale, and they turned the game around in the second half.
One final note on this one. Ryan told me the other day that he does not enjoy Popeyes, finds it too flavorful, and prefers steamed chicken prepared by his manservant, Philip. Now we will find out if Ryan listened all the way through this episode. We are going to take a break on that note. When we come back, Joe will be talking to Tom Braun, COO of the LA Galaxy. Graham and I will be silent during that interview. Back soon.
Welcome back into the Total Soccer Show. Joe Lowry here. I have the pleasure of being joined by Tom Braun, the Chief Operating Officer and President of Business Operations for the LA Galaxy. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. Your background is putting mine to shame. I'm working on it. How are you?
Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Thanks for including me.
I'm glad you were able to come on. And I'm fascinated to pick your brain on a variety of some bigger picture topics, both about the Galaxy and about MLS in this moment. First, maybe a bit on your background for listeners and viewers help here. You've been with the Galaxy for a decade. Now you were promoted to your current role back in 2023. You've been on the Sports Business Journal's 40 Under 40. You oversee, Tom, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, the Galaxy's business operations, and I think that helps maybe add a really valuable perspective on not just the Galaxy, but about some of those bigger picture things at a moment where a lot of eyes are about to be on soccer in the United States. Tom, did I miss any of the big picture hits on your role with the Galaxy or your background in the last decade or so?
Yeah, so my background actually started in investment banking, and I had a little bit of a non-traditional path into sports and into soccer. But now it seems like it's almost becoming a bit more traditional. And we work closely with the soccer side, and right now is an incredible moment for our sport in our country. With the World Cup coming in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of with that in mind, I want to ask you about some of the changes that have happened with the Galaxy and with MLS and some of the things that are probably still to come for soccer in the United States. And let's start in Carson. Let's start with the Galaxy. Obviously, on-field results have shifted recently, and I was out in your building for MLS Cup just a few months ago now. That has changed compared to recent history. The organizational philosophy, though, it seems to me has changed a little bit as well. Will Kuntz, in charge of the front office for you all, has talked about wanting the Galaxy to shift from being star takers with the Beckhams and Zlatans and, run through the list of the world to being star makers. That's the quote that he's given a few different times. How does that philosophical shift, Tom, for you on the personnel side of the club impact the business side of the club?
Yeah, so I started with the club in 2013, 2014, and you're right, back then, and Will's right, it was a lot about star takers and maybe a little less about star makers. But the philosophy has shifted, and we've come a long way in 10 years. And what Will has done on the field is really remarkable, along with Greg Vanny in such a short period of time. You'll remember 2023, we finished the season in 13th out of 14 in our conference, and then coming into 2024, lifting a trophy and winning MLS Cup. It couldn't be more proud of how our organization has risen over the last year. And really, Will and I moved into our roles at a similar time. And we knew going into it that we had to shift the culture. We had to shift the culture internally and shift it externally. Remember, we want our fans and our own staff to believe in something that, maybe they haven't believed in quite a long period of time. And that's not going to happen by doing things exactly how we've always done it. So we've made a very conscious effort of doing different and elevating expectations, elevating accountability, and delivering results. So on our side, we want to contribute to the home stadium experience. And you'll recall in 2024, the LA Galaxy were undefeated at home. We played, I think, 20 or so games across all competitions at home, and we were undefeated. And we take so much pride in that stat because that means I think we're delivering at all levels, right? We're delivering with the team on the field, but we're also contributing with the fans and the experience that the fans have coming into our building.
Do you feel that there's a change in the excitement of the fans from when some of these bigger established names that people know are coming into this club compared to when it's someone like Gabriel Peck or Josep Painza, where incredible players last season, and they proved that very, very quickly, but not necessarily household names in the way that some have arrived in this club before. Marco Reus is in a different category there, certainly. Do you think that shift from the personnel side of this club has impacted your role in any way, or is it more of a larger sort of cultural shift that you're seeing that's been beneficial?
Yeah, I think it's Los Angeles. Los Angeles likes teams winning. They have high expectations, and we have to deliver on that. Marco Reus is a very big name, but also in the past year with Ricky Puig or Josep Painza or Gabriel Peck, at Dejan Joveljic last year, these guys became stars. They're stars within the LA Galaxy and within MLS, and even more so on the global level. And a lot of that comes from them just performing at a high level. Our fans want to see exciting soccer, and they want to see the LA Galaxy winning. And whether you're a really big name or a name that's an up-and-comer, if you deliver results on the field just like Ricky Puig and Gabriel Peck did last year, it really helps, and it goes a long way with our fan base and with growing the sport in Los Angeles.
I'm curious for you, Tom, with the Galaxy's reputation for so long being the foremost club in Major League Soccer, being the team that if you were to go to a non-MLS market in the United States or to anywhere abroad, if you were to see an MLS jersey, you would see the Galaxy's jersey. Now with what's going on in Miami, at least based off my own personal experience, maybe that's changed a little bit. How do you think about the race with Inter Miami for those fans outside of MLS markets? Do you think about that? Does that take up mental space for you?
I think it's wonderful when other teams want to compete at the level that the LA Galaxy has competed at such a long period of time. We were the original with signing of David Beckham, and even before that, we had one of the greatest American players of all time, Kobe Jones. And then moves into Zlatan and others. But we've been doing it for a long period of time, and I still think that proving last year with the championship that we are the foremost, most successful team in Major League Soccer. But I applaud and I encourage other teams to continue to take that leap and continue to push, just like Miami has done, and Atlanta does a really good job, and other teams within the league. I think it's important for our league to continue to elevate, especially going into what will be the biggest event in the history of the world in 2026 when the World Cup is here.
Yeah, on that note with the World Cup, and I want to circle back to this idea of other teams pushing to move themselves forward and maybe to move the league forward as well. But to stick with the World Cup for a minute, Tom, there's a lot of discussion right now, and Nelson Rodriguez had some comments to Jeff Carlisle in a great piece for ESPN that I'd encourage people to go read about MLS sort of wanting to capitalize on some things on the back of that World Cup, and of course that's going to be a real area of focus. For you in your role with the Galaxy in one of these 30 clubs in Major League Soccer, how are you thinking about, how are you in this organization planning to help this club capitalize on these extra soccer-obsessed eyeballs and people that are going to be watching and paying attention to and like right around this club in this city when the World Cup's on U.S. soil in 2026?
Yeah, you'll remember the MLS was birthed at the '94 World Cup.
Sure.
And the final of the '94 World Cup was just down the street in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl, the LA Galaxy's original home. And you have soccer fans, and those soccer fans will show up for the LA Galaxy. But then with the World Cup comes casual soccer fans that are interested because others are interested. That happens whether or not the World Cup is in North America in the U.S. in Los Angeles, or it happens if the World Cup is in South Africa or other places. Just the interest around the World Cup and the U.S. competing in the World Cup, or your country competing in the World Cup, brings attention in different eyeballs. So our idea and our hope is that those fans now become interested in the LA Galaxy. And our job at the LA Galaxy, and I think we're at a very important inflection point or point within our club's history, that when you come to Dignity Health Sports Park, it's an experience. It's not just a soccer match, but you're telling us this is a great experience and you want to come back for another time. So for us, it's how are we delivering that when you go to a soccer match, you feel something different than maybe if you go to any other sporting event or even if you do some other sort of activity. It really comes down to how are you making people feel while they're attending an LA Galaxy match.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to that, Tom. In my experience, and I'm imagining the experience for many folks listening or watching, is that it is one of the strengths for Major League Soccer and for a lot of the clubs in MLS is the in-game experience, right? Where you go and see, even thinking about how MLS has produced a lot of this documentary on Side and highlighted a lot of the great rivalries and fan bases and the Galaxy-Miami game from last year being the feature of that first episode. And you see firsthand, well, I suppose not quite firsthand, but you get to see that these looks at how clubs position themselves to draw fans and to really make those experiences entertaining. I suppose to drill down into that a little bit deeper, how do you can only fit so many people inside your building at a given time, right? And a lot of this is maybe how do you get more people to know about your club, even if they're not always able to come to games, or even if you can't expand to 45, 50, 60, 65, 70,000 seats like some of these NFL team stadiums can do inside of this league. Do you think about this any deeper than we need to get more people in seats? Is there also a marketing component to say, hey, out of the World Cup, we need to make sure more people know about the LA Galaxy, period, whether they're coming to these games or not?
Yeah, so we base a lot of our KPIs on things that aren't like traditional KPIs. I think that some clubs or some businesses base off of. I think a lot of people look at revenues and judge success over revenues. We judge a lot of our success off of other things, like how big is our population of Galaxy fans, or how are we doing things that aren't a traditional way? Because in the end, it comes back to how many people are coming back to a game. But how are you reaching new audiences? Simply going out and saying, are you interested in coming to soccer, probably isn't enough. So we've incorporated through our Galaxy Studios team, we added a DJ to every game, right? And last year, it might be a small thing in the eyes of many, but I think it's a really big thing, because last year we had Alesso, we had Afrojack, we had these really big stars who have really big platforms perform at our games at pre-game and halftime, and they have these audience that they're now connecting with, and you're seeing, well, wait, I might not have been the LA Galaxy fan before, but I'm a fan of this artist, and I'm interested now. Maybe I will then come to a game. And then if the experience is good enough at the game, we're getting you to come back for one or two or three other times, right? So it comes down to how are you tapping into different audiences, and how are you creating a brand that reaches more than just someone who is going to interested in a soccer game. You want them to become interested in a soccer game in a different way.
And I'm curious, I think that makes a ton of sense, Tom. I'm curious how you think about expanding that beyond the in-game experience. And part of this is MLS still at this point, in a lot of ways, is a fairly localized league, right? Where there are dedicated followings in markets, where they're getting excellent attendance both across the league and in a lot of specific markets, but without a ton of national attention and with TV numbers that historically have struggled. How can MLS, in your perspective and with your experience with the Galaxy, how can MLS try to move a little bit closer towards being a league that captures some broader attention, not just in these specific 30 markets in the league?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it really comes down to broadcast in media, right? And we have probably the best broadcast partner you could possibly have in Apple, right? You can be in any home in the world and watch an LA Galaxy game. It doesn't just have to be in Los Angeles, and having a company like Apple that we're partnered with it could not be better. So our job is to make sure that how are we encouraging people to want to watch our games on Apple, and how are we driving viewership, and that goes into the content that we're producing and the reminder of when games are and how you can access the platform and watch our matches. But as a huge part of what we're doing, and the audience that's out there to watch a game via Apple is so big, so much bigger than even the 26,000 that might be able to fit into Dignity Sports Park on a given Sunday or Saturday.
You've talked in the past, Tom, about how at times you'll listen to fan podcasts to try and get feedback and ideas of how can we make what we're doing better? How can we make this better? I'm curious on the broadcast front about how the shift from having LA Galaxy games broadcasted locally on Sportsnet to them being streamed on Apple TV has impacted the club. And even beyond that, I'm curious, what have fans thought of this? Because I think there have been, in some circles, maybe some mixed responses of people that aren't thrilled to have to pay for a different subscription service, and having games, not all of them, but a lot of games behind a paywall is maybe not always as convenient for people. What have you heard from LA Galaxy fans about this shift from local TV to Apple TV?
Yeah, so you're right. I spent a lot of time listening to fan podcasts. I spent a lot of time conducting surveys of our fans, and we also have something that we are proud of called the Fan Council, which is about 17 LA Galaxy fans that meet very often and give their feedback on the LA Galaxy. And for a long period of time, I think we weren't paying enough attention to what the fans are telling us, and we've made it a priority now on listening to them and making adjustments and changes based on that feedback. I think the platform and the Apple platform is unmatched. I don't think there's a better way to consume an LA Galaxy game than on Apple and MLS Season Pass. But you're right, it does take a little bit of a step, and people want to have to intentionally watch. So we're finding ways, whether it's through our marketing efforts or directing people to go and listen. There are opportunities where there are many games that are in front of the paywall, and there are games in which are on linear TV that give people the opportunity to watch and maybe don't have to get to go through a paywall. And then obviously there's ways to access it through T-Mobile devices and others to get access to LA Galaxy games. It's really just telling the narrative and encouraging people to check us out. Because I think once you get a chance to watch a game on MLS Season Pass, I don't think there's a better way to consume it.
I think that's quite fair. Once you're in the door, I have found it to be a really useful user experience in a lot of ways. Tom, I want to go back to something you said earlier about other clubs in this league pushing themselves forward and maybe pushing the league forward as a whole. I think maybe you used this word earlier, this phrase. I think this is or could be something of an inflection point for Major League Soccer with the World Cup so close and with the Apple deal and the potential of the value of that partnership. Along the way, MLS has continued to talk about this idea of wanting to be a league of choice, right? Which is a pretty broad term that maybe it doesn't have a lot of specificity behind it. But Nelson Rodriguez at MLS HQ had told ESPN in that same piece I referenced earlier that he thinks in 30 years MLS can be better than the Premier League. And we don't need to drill down into the specifics of that or of the difficulty of accomplishing that task given the gulf between those two leagues. But I'm curious for you, do you agree that MLS can really push itself into being one of the best leagues in the world in terms of quality or in terms of the audience size? And if so, is part of that what you said earlier, more clubs around the league trying to push themselves forward to raise the level and a rising tide lifts all boats sort of situation?
Yeah, I think we have 30 teams in the league, and in every team in the league, and each ownership group seems really motivated to make this league really special and continue to elevate the expectations of this league. And to think that this is our 30th season for a domestic league prior to MLS to find its footing was really challenging. And in 30 years, our league went from an idea coming out of the '94 World Cup to what you see now with 30 teams that are thriving and players, and I do believe players are choosing MLS over other opportunities, and you see that with players like Messi and Marco Reus, and you're seeing these players who are choosing us who have other opportunities, and it's just going to continue to elevate what we're doing, and it's just a huge part of what we are planning, and I think teams know this, that 2026 is an important part of the narrative and where our sport is going.
Yeah, fair enough. And I suppose along with that idea of looking towards 2026, there's been discussion, and Commissioner Don Garber has discussed this publicly, about the league evaluating a calendar shift, maybe to mirror those Western European leagues that are held up as the standard for soccer globally in a lot of ways. Do you anticipate sort of along with that any broader changes, whether that's on the roster rule side, on how clubs are running themselves from a business perspective and more in your purview? Do you anticipate any of those sorts of changes coming to MLS ahead of the World Cup or sort of on the back of the 2026 World Cup?
It's hard to say. I think the league is constantly evolving. I think each year the league is evolving for ways to either loosen up the player spending or evolving the sport. And I don't think anything's off the table, and I don't think anything is necessarily committed to at the moment. But I think conversations have been ongoing across the league for many different things. And I'm excited to see what comes out of it, because I know that the league is working really hard to continue to elevate MLS in our country, across North America.
Tom, maybe to close us out here, earlier you mentioned that you and Will Kuntz come into your roles in the Galaxy organization at a very similar time back in 2023, and that one of the things that you wanted to focus on was changing the culture. I'm curious, is there a specific moment sort of that comes to mind for you where you realized, man, we are doing something right. Yes, eventually we're getting results on the field in 2024, but whether it's in that 23 period or into 2024, you think this is different than how it was before. This is exciting, this is new, and I can see that we are making real progress internally with our culture.
Yeah. When you move into the role, everyone expects you, I think, to have all the solutions on day one, and they constantly will ask you, what are you going to do different? And really, I think over the course of 2024, I think we've proven to everybody that we're doing it different. And, we went in to 2024 with the expectation of, let's make playoffs, right? How are we going to make playoffs? And it never feels right for the LA Galaxy simply to say we're just going to make playoffs. It seems like we should be achieving more and striving for more. But there was a moment in time, and it was almost building on itself throughout the year, where making playoffs was never going to be enough for the LA Galaxy. Getting in the playoffs and then advancing and competing for a trophy was really the goal. And there were many moments throughout the season last year in 2024 where we rode really high and then we got knocked down, and then we rode really high and we got knocked down, and that could be shown on even on decision day when we fell at the last minute and got seated in second place, which I think ended up maybe even being a blessing for us in our path. So. But there was a moment last year, I think, where it kind of came together, and I think it was the second half of our third LAFC game where we went down 2-0 at halftime and came back and won 4-2, and you could just tell in people's minds that that was a good moment for the club. But that being said, I think even the home opener against Miami, where we competed at the highest level and feel strongly we should have won that game, but it gave us the confidence in the locker room and on the field and in the stands that, hey, we were really on to something special last year.
Tom, I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for coming on the show to add color to what is, I think, still a fascinating moment for American soccer. Tom Braun, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you once again to Tom Braun for sitting down. I assume he was sitting down with Joe Lowry. Who knows for sure? Joe, thank you for doing that interview. Graham, thank you for being silent the entire time. Joe demanded we sit here and listen, but we're not allowed to even audibly breathe. So I feel like we did a good job, even though Graham at the same time was watching, I think, 3 games simultaneously. So nicely done, Graham.
Yeah, I managed to get some work in. I finally finished that Montpellier-Lyon game that I was talking about on the weekend review, so that was useful.
The specificity of that reference makes me think that
right?
you did actually watch some of that
It's
game.
uncomfortable, for sure.
I did see some of the Lyon game. They weren't playing Montpellier at the weekend, but Paulo Fonseca almost headbutted a referee.
No,
so
I'm not doing this. No, Graham, we're not talking about this. I'm not indulging this, Graham. This is an intervention. Go watch Survivor. Stop watching so much football. Don't watch Survivor. That will get you hooked as well.
Okay, I will.
Joe, thank you for doing that interview. Thank you for your overreactions today. This has been a very fun episode, at least for me, hopefully for you.
Oh, I love this. Thanks, Taylor.
Graham, thank you and your Euphoria kit for all of your hard work and endeavor today.
Thank you, Taylor Rock. Well, Survivor might not be my favourite show, but Euphoria is for reasons.
We made it almost all the way through without Graham.
I tried to avoid that.
Nope, that stays in, and everyone knows what Graham is talking about. And on that note, thank you all for listening. Cover your children's ears when Graham talks from now on, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.